Carson Wentz is now with his third team of his career after being traded to the Commanders this offseason. Last time we saw Wentz, he and the Colts lost to the Jags in Week 18 and missed the playoffs. Now, Troy Aikman believes that this is Wentz's last chance to prove himself as a franchise quarterback.
I think that right now, Carson had an opportunity. It didn't end well in Philadelphia, of course. He then got traded to Indianapolis. Didn't go great for him there. They decided to make another change at that position, and now he's landed in Washington. And this is probably his last opportunity. Just being blunt about it to prove that he can be a franchise quarterback in the NFL.
I don't even know that he is the franchise guy. I don't think that this is even that opportunity. I think he's already lost that.
He's a bridge guy.
I think he's a bridge guy.
I talked to Carson yesterday, and I asked him about that. I said, I think it's fair that Troy Aikman said it's your last chance. How do you respond? And, his takeaway was, yeah, it's not unfair. He didn't, he was an interesting guy. Carson Wentz's reputation, we always hear this stuff. I don't know if he gets along with players. So I interviewed him for 25 minutes yesterday. I thought he was incredibly likable. Everything I said, hey, Jim Irsay said you were a mistake. He just laughed. He's like, well, he owns the team. He can say whatever he wants about me. He was really good-natured about it.
No, I don't think he's a bad guy. I just think when you're now on your third place, and we've heard things about the locker room in two places, and now you're going into a situation where they're still in kind of a culture rebuild.
Yeah.
My thing with Carson has always been, what do you do in the big moments? Because him and Dak have always been compared to each other, and rightfully so. And for the longest time, everyone was like, Carson is more talented. If you had to choose between Carson or Dak, you would always go with Carson. You would go with Carson. And Dak obviously hasn't had the postseason success either, but I don't get the ups and downs with Dak, right? Like, I know what I'm going to get from Dak. I know that Dak needs pieces around him. I know that. But I'm not going to get the collapse. Like, even the way that the Cowboys season ended this year, I put that on Mike McCarthy.
Yeah. No, these are all things I addressed with him about the Jacksonville game and about, I said, listen, you remind me of Sam Darnold, but taller and stronger. You're reckless. He addressed that. He was in a really good mood about it. I mean, he never got defensive. He was like, hey, that stuff's out there. People, I don't hear all of it, but friends tell me that people say it. And he's like, in the end, you are what your record is. And at the end of the year, he had a bad game in a crucial time. That's what he is now.
Right. And if you're the Colts, you know what it takes to win championships. So you've got to hold yourself to that standard. Now, I don't know if they're in a much better position this year. We'll find out. But I do think, obviously, I do think the Commanders are better with him.
Did you see what
I will say that.
I could be wrong on this. James Bradbury, the Eagles picked up another corner today. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Good.
No, I think it's the Eagles' division.
So do I. Joy with the news.
Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
The heat is on, Colin.
Yeah, whatever.
My Miami Heat took Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals last night with a 118-107 win. Although a great game, though, because I was a little nervous in the first half. The Heat had a ton of turnovers to start the game.
But, I saw this number. I don't want to bog you down. Boston had 42 points in the first half in the paint. It is the most points by the Celtics in 25 years in the paint in one half. Now, that's a lot to digest. But if you watch the first half, Boston was getting layups and dunks like every other time down the floor. In the modern game, to get 42 paint points without a Shaq or without like an Embiid, it doesn't even make any sense. So as I was watching that, I'm like, okay, they're not doing that again in the second half. There's no way they're getting that many easy baskets on the road against Miami in the second half.
No, and Miami was just turning the ball over, just lazy, uncharacteristic passes, really not getting back on defense. It was a rough first half for Miami. But as Nick Wright said earlier, they played a stretch of perfect defense that completely turned the game around, which I'm sure was the conversation at halftime. Forget trying to score and keep up. Just play defense. Don't turn the ball over, and you'll get right back in the game, which they did. And it wasn't like they pulled away immediately. It went back and forth for a while, but they did end up getting the 118-107 win. And they outscored the Celtics in the third quarter, which was really the key, 39-14. But Jimmy Butler is the story once again, leading the way with 41 points, 17 of which came in that third quarter. And here is Spoelstra on what Jimmy brings to the team.
Jimmy Butler is an elite competitor. There's a lot of guys in this league that are playing basketball he's competing to win. That's a totally different thing, and he does that as well as anybody in this league. Every time and pocket in the game when we needed to control, the game or get the right shot or make the right decision, Jimmy had his fingerprints on that.
Yeah, we don't talk about the intangibles too much when it comes to basketball. But it really does matter, and especially when you get into the postseason. And I know everyone jokes about Heat culture, and the Heat don't have that standalone star.
But their culture's real, though.
It is, but I think all the teams that are left in the postseason right now have a culture. They're not teams that are dysfunctional. They're not noisy. They don't have nonsense going on. They don't have players who are not showing up to play.
You brought something up earlier that's a good point. Sports has always been cyclical, and everybody overreacts to the moment.
Yes.
But if you start looking around, the Kevin Durant move to Brooklyn hasn't worked.
Nope.
LeBron to L.A. worked briefly, but it hasn't worked. Giannis stayed. Boston guys stay. Remember, Butler's whole thing was, can I get the right culture that demands work ethic? So if you start Golden State's culture, guys mostly stay. If you look at what's happening, Joy, in this cyclical NBA, hey, let's get a bunch of stars together. It's not working right now. And let's draft and develop, take care of our players, treat them well, pay them as much as the market allows.
Right.
That's everybody freaked out when Durant went to Golden State. And it was, even the commissioner didn't like it. And it was for a couple years, like it competitively almost unfair. But nothing lasts forever.
Correct.
The mobility stuff, players are still mobile, but the Clippers thing hasn't worked. The Nets thing didn't work. The Lakers are a mess. Ultimately, players want to stay with the team that drafts. LeBron would have stayed in Cleveland if they could have got him, if they would have drafted, Chris Bosh next door.
I also think that you have to draft or bring in people to the building that fit what you do.
Yeah.
And I think the NFL, the well-run NFL teams do this very well. You need to study players, study their personality, sit down with them, get to know them. Don't fall in love with the tape. Don't fall in love with the stats. Is this player going to fit what we do? Is this a player that likes to practice? The Heat have notoriously hard practices. They're very demanding. They want you to play defense. Don't bring in somebody who's a defensive liability. That's why they don't have Duncan Robinson in the lineup for most of the playoffs. He's a defensive liability. Yes, they might put him in to get some shots, but they're going to need defense in these series, so it doesn't fit. And don't be afraid to back off of that. And the other thing is to pitch your fan base on reality. Don't go out there making obscene promises and all this flashy stuff that doesn't have any substance, because that's when they start to get upset, rightfully so, because they want results that you can't promise because you haven't been consistent with anything. But Jimmy fits that culture perfectly.